Hey, and welcome to Synaptic Soul, the podcast where science meets spirit, and we get real about the beautiful and brutal and magical mess of being human. I'm your host, Ava Marie Anderson, writer, mystic, multidimensional mischief maker. Quick disclaimer, you may hear the occasional snort, sigh, dramatic flop from my two French bulldogs, Rocky and Rambo. They're the soundtracks of my life, my soul companions, and honestly, the real stars of the show. Someday we'll dedicate a full episode to their role in my daily rituals, emotional healing, and wild spiritual life. But for now, just know that they're always close by, snoring their support. Let's dive in. It doesn't always start with a lightning bolt or a dramatic shift. Most of the time, it begins like a soft crackle in the background, a glitch in the static of your daily life. A moment when your world, which once felt solid and knowledgeable, starts to feel like it's made of paper and thin and terrible and possibly fake. It might hit you when you're folding laundry or listening to someone talk about interest rates at dinner, and then suddenly everything feels absurd. Like you look around and think, wait, is this really all there is? And just like that, a fissure forms in your carefully constructed identity. It's like the soul clears its throat after a long nap. And yes, this is your first glitch. No one tells you that an awakening can feel like dissociation dressed in divine drag. There is an existential dizziness that takes over. Like you're doing the things, but none of it feels real. You start to sense time bending, and conversations feel hollow, and you hear a bird outside and it feels like a cosmic message. Your body becomes this strange antenna picking up signals that you can't explain. And you're not crazy, babe. You're calibrating. Your frequency is shifting, and your soul is logging in, and the system is rebooting. Your sense of humor gets weirder. Your tolerance for BS decreases by the hour. Everything starts to feel off script because it is. You're no longer following the narrative. Like they handed you a pen, and now you're realizing that you were always the author. And so, with that pen in hand, you may find yourself editing your life mid-sentence. You start looking at people that you've known forever, wondering how you never really noticed the misalignment. That relationship or that job or that habit. It all starts to shimmer with the uncomfortable truth of outdated programming. Your intuition gets louder. Your body becomes a barometer. And what used to feel like comfort now feels like contraction. And somewhere in between brushing your teeth and reading an Instagram caption about the moon, it clicks. You're no longer asleep. You're sensing the hum of the universe again. You're being pulled towards something, your real self, your purpose, and your people. And it's magnetic. So this is the phase when people either double down on the illusion, numbing with wine or overworking or endless scrolling, or they crack open. And you start to notice the little signs, like synchronicities and dreams that feel like memories or random tears in the grocery store. Your playlists start to change, and so do your cravings. You stop craving approval and you start craving meaning. And it's biology too, not just woo. That crack you feel, it's your nervous system detangling from survival mode. Your vagus nerve is starting to sing again, and your parasympathetic system is stretching its limbs. You're waking up, and there's no going back. In fact, what's happening inside your body is a complete repatterning of your nervous system and your electromagnetic field. Your heart generates the most powerful electromagnetic signal in the body, and as you awaken, the frequency of your heart's field begins to shift. Heart Math Institute studies show that emotions like love and compassion and gratitude amplify the heart's coherence, creating a domino effect that rewires your brain and stabilizes your body's biochemistry. This is why a spiritual awakening doesn't just feel good emotionally, it transforms your internal landscape physiologically. And this is where neuroception kicks in, which is that subconscious ability to scan for safety and truth. As you become more attuned, your body begins to reject environments and people that aren't aligned with your expanded frequency. It's not judgment, it's biology. Your sensory perception is recalibrating to truth, and your skin gets prickly around certain people. Your gut clenches when you're out of alignment, and your body whispers yes before your mind can even form a sentence. You're being led, not by logic, but by light encoded in your own nervous system. And here's the kicker: your energy doesn't lie anymore. You might look the same on the outside, but something in you is vibrating at a frequency that you can't ignore. That's why the job feels wrong now. That's why you walk into the room and feel the tension before a word is spoken. You're being tuned, tapped. And even when you might feel isolated or like you're losing your grip on reality, what you're actually doing is dropping into it deeper than most people ever allow. And that takes courage and clarity and a touch of cosmic rebellion. So once the veil starts thinning, your body becomes a frequency receiver. You're not just sensing more, you're remembering more. Like this isn't your first rodeo and your cells know it. And suddenly, you're crying over a flower, drawn to the study of ancient Egypt, and speaking to your houseplants like they're your council of elders. And spoiler alert, they might be. Soul remembrance often arrives dressed in nonsense until you realize that it is the most honest truth that you have ever felt. Your ancestors start showing up too. Not always as faces in the clouds or whispers in the night, although sometimes, yeah. More often, though, it's in the way your grandma's lullaby suddenly loops into your head after decades, or the way your body remembers a dance that you've never been taught. This is ancestral memory. It's epigenetics with a side of spiritual sass. Science now confirms what the mystics have always known, that trauma and gifts and wisdom are stored in your DNA. So when you awaken, you're not just healing your story, you're entangling centuries. And not all of these memories are easy to digest. You may have flashbacks that don't belong to this life, images and sounds, even accents or languages that you don't know that you know. It's like slipping sideways into time. You could chalk it up to imagination, but imagination in its highest form is a doorway, a living bridge between the layers of self across lifetimes and dimensions. And your soul is multilingual and multidimensional. It remembers the witch trials. It remembers Atlantis. It remembers every time it had to dim itself down to survive. But now it's done hiding. And then there's the synchronicities, those divine winks that stack up faster than the laundry you stopped doing last week. The numbers and names and animals and songs, overheard conversations, each one feels too perfectly timed to be a coincidence. These aren't accidents. They're frequency matchmakers. They're multidimensional nudges reminding you that you're not alone and you're not off course. The soul communicates in symbols, and now you're fluent. So, spiritual awakening at its core is a reactivation of your subtle energetic anatomy, your meridians, your chakras, your auric field. It's the electromagnetic system lighting back up after years of being dulled by trauma and fear and cultural sedation. Think of it like rebooting your spiritual Wi-Fi. You're no longer operating from 3G. You are plugged into source fiber optic bandwidth. And then what comes through? Memories and codes and patterns and truth. And yeah, sometimes waves of grief that feel ancient because they are. This stage of awakening often brings a sudden craving for ritual. You start lighting candles and building altars and drawing baths with herbs that you never knew the names of until now. This is your body remembering how to pray in ways older than language. Because ancestral memory lives in your bones. And when the soul awakens, the body doesn't just catch up, it leads. You literally become the living temple, the priest or priestess of your own rebirth. This episode is supported in part by Sage App, aka the app that's basically a metaphysical multivitamin. It's like having a spiritual sanctuary in your pocket, minus the incense smoke in your purse. It's also where I host my new moon manifestation clubs, which, if you know, we go deep. So if you're ready to stop doom scrolling and start soul scrolling, download Sage in the App Store or Google Play and then step into a more intentional, magical version of your day. That's SAGED, like Sage, but with an app. Back to the episode. Let's talk about the holy grail of mystical meets medical, your brain. Spiritual awakening isn't just a shift in mindset, it's neurochemical upheaval. This is your brain on consciousness, baby. The architecture of your mind starts to rewire in real time. The default mode network, the area responsible for looping stories and ego identity and fear projections, begins to soften. This network is what makes you think I'm separate, or I have to compete, or I should be afraid. But when awakening begins, that system starts to go quiet. And in that stillness, you start to perceive something more ancient and more vast and more you. It's not metaphor, it's measurable. Neuroscientific studies show that mystics and meditators and those in psychedelic states show decreased activity in this region and increased connectivity between areas of the brain that don't normally talk. It's like someone unplugged your inner critic and handed the mic to your higher self. Your brain waves begin to shift, moving out of a high frequency beta stress response into alpha and theta, which is where deep healing and creativity live. You become a walking frequency beacon, receptive to insight and intuition and divine downloads. Your the famed third eye, begins to activate. This tiny pine cone shaped structure sits at the center of your brain, regulating melatonin and responding to lights. But it also has photoreceptor cells, literally light sensitive tissue. So when you awaken, your internal chemistry starts to glow. And some scientists speculate that the pineal gland produces DMT, which is the spirit molecule. And if true, then awakening naturally floods your brain with the biochemistry of transcendence. No ayahuasca needed. Just presence and truth and spiritual hunger. And then there's your nervous system. The enteric brain, aka the gut, holds over 100 million neurons. And it remembers, and it responds, and it reacts to trauma and intuition alike. And so when you start clearing out the spiritual debris, your gut begins to detox too. You might feel nauseous or hungry or dizzy or you're euphoric at odd times. And your digestion shifts. Why? Because your entire being is integrating truth. You're not thinking your way into awakening, you're digesting it. And your hormones change. Your estrogen and your cortisol and your adrenaline, they all recalibrate as your body returns to a state of coherence. Your breath slows. Your heart expands. You might start having vivid dreams or spontaneous tears or what I lovingly call spiritual fevers, which are those nights where you feel like you're burning off lifetimes. And you might be. You're not broken, though. You're in sacred surgery. And the divine scalpel doesn't always feel gentle, but it is precise. Nobody warns you that becoming who you are requires the death of who you are not. And death, she's not always gentle. And this part hurts. It's the grief of leaving behind the version of you that knew how to survive, the people pleasing or the overachiever, shrinking and hiding. That self kept you alive. But they're not who you came here to be. And letting go is a heartbreak all its own. This shedding isn't a symbolic flourish, it's a physiological purge. The body begins releasing what the psyche has held on to decades. Stored trauma, locked in fascia, begins to move. Trapped emotions like shame and rage and fear start crawling to the surface. You might cry for days. You might isolate. You might feel like you're coming undone. But what's actually happening is a cellular detox, a complete repatterning of your emotional blueprints. And it's nervous system alchemy. In the language of trauma healing, this is the thaw. This is the part where the frozen and braced parts of you begin to finally move. And like any ice melt, it gets messy. It gets muddy and flooded. And you question everything and you resist and you doubt. But if you stay in the fire long enough, something starts to shift. And it's not back to who you were, but toward who you're becoming and who you've always been underneath the armor. And that grief that you feel, it's ancestral. You're mourning not just your losses, but the losses your lineage endured without release. You're breaking patterns that go back generations, cycles of silence and self-denial and being good to stay alive. You might find yourself raging at your parents or your pastors or your professors or your partners, and the rage is righteous. It's the emotional fire that purifies the bloodline. Awakening requires sacrifice, old identities, old beliefs, old roles, and yeah, sometimes old relationships. You might feel betrayed by life, but what's really happening is that life is refusing to allow you to betray yourself any longer. You'll lose people who don't recognize the new vibration you carry, and that's not abandonment. That's recalibration. You are not being left behind. You're being lifted beyond. This episode is brought to you in part by one of my most favorite humans on this spinning planet, Morgan Garza, and her book Soul Magic. If you've ever felt like your power was just waiting beneath the surface, or like there's something ancient and electric inside of you ready to be reclaimed, then this is the book that helps you remember. Soul Magic is not just a read, it is a summoning. It's filled with rituals and stories and the kind of grounded spiritual wisdom that doesn't talk at you, it talks with you. Morgan writes like a soul sister, a cosmic cheerleader, and a priestess all rolled into one. And it's a must-have for anyone on the path of awakening, reclaiming. So grab your copy at morgangarza.com or wherever books are sold, or bless someone else's journey and gift it, because real magic's meant to be shared. That's Soul Magic by Morgan Garza. You'll feel it in your bones. And here we are at the spiral. The truth they never tell you in the marketing packages of awakening is that it doesn't end. It spirals. And just when you think you have reached the summit, another layer peels open. And then another truth rises. And then another piece of shadow asks for your hand. And this is the sacred rhythm of the soul. The spiral is encoded in all life, in seashells and galaxies, in our DNA. It's the path of nonlinear evolution. We revisit our wounds not because we failed to heal them, but because we're ready to meet them with more capacity and more truth and more grace. You don't go back, you go deeper. You pass through the same gates from a higher vantage point each time. You'll revisit themes. You'll reopen chapters. You'll look into mirrors that you thought you smashed. But this time, you bring more of yourself with you. The version who sees with clearer eyes. The one who doesn't run. The one who holds themselves with tenderness even in the face of the next unraveling. And if you're lucky, and brave, you begin to see that awakening isn't about escaping the human experience. It's about inhabiting it so fully that you become a bridge between the heaven and the earth. Not because you float above, but because you root into. You hold paradox and you live the spiral. This is sacred integration. It's when you laugh and cry at the same breath, or when you hold grief and gratitude at the same time. When you feel the ache of being alive and you still say yes over and over and over again. And that yes is prayer. That yes is portal. You're not becoming someone new. You're remembering someone ancient, someone holy, someone who knows that truth isn't something you find, it's something that you become. And so you spiral, and the spiral brings you home again and again and again. So let's talk about the body, not as a shell and not as a burden, but as your wisest spiritual teacher. We live in a culture that has glorified disembodiment. We have been taught to worship intellect and suppress instinct and ignore intuition. But when you awaken spiritually, one of the most surprising and sacred experiences is the re entry into your physical form. You begin to feel everything more vividly, not because you're fragile, but because you're finally online. And this isn't sensitivity, it's sentience. It's your body no longer numb from years of trauma suppression and productivity addiction starts to speak. And when it speaks, it roars and it whispers and it shakes and it softens. The truth doesn't just live in your mind, it lives in your fascia and in your breath and in the way your hips hold stories and your throat swells when your truth goes unspoken. It's somatic intelligence, and awakening reintroduces you to it. Your cells hold a memory of your soul's path, and when you start to heal, you feel the pain that's been frozen for decades. And you feel the joy too, some in ways that are primal and wordless. The body doesn't need language, it just needs space. Like space to emote, to dance, to tremble, and to scream, and to rest. Your ancestors shook during ceremony. They knew that this wasn't indulgence, it was spiritual technology. They wailed and they drummed and they keened, not because they were out of control, but because they were in communion. So modern science now supports this. Polyvagal theory shows us that our capacity to heal and connect is regulated by the vagus nerve. And when you breathe, and when you chant, and when you hum, and when you slow down and drop in, your body moves from sympathetic fight or flight into parasympathetic rest and digest. And the shift isn't mental, it's alchemical. It's your divine design returning to balance. So, yes, sweat is sacred, and so is stillness, and so is the goosebump on your arm when truth moves through you, and so is the rage in your jaw when you remember what you settled for. This body, this beautiful, aching animal body, is the altar, so don't transcend it, tend to it. It's the oracle. All right, so you've awakened, and then you've remembered, and then you've cried and spiraled and shed, and you've screamed into pillows, and now what? Now comes the part that nobody markets because it's not sexy, but it is essential. It's your integration. It's that moment when all the cosmic downloads and mystical insights have to be lived and embodied and implied. This is where the rubber meets the road, or rather, where your soul meets the soil. And integration is about choosing again. It's saying, I remember who I am, and I'm going to speak differently, and I'm going to love differently, and I'm going to work differently, and parent differently. It's doing the unglamorous things with sacred intention, like having those hard conversations or setting those boundaries or cleaning out your closet, forgiving your past selves. It's bringing divinity to the grocery store and magic to your inbox and sacredness to the ordinary. And here's the part where it gets delicious. When you choose to live awake, you rewire your reality. Your perception shifts, your quantum field realigns, and you begin to attract what matches your new resonance. And it's not just manifesting from a vision board, it's magnetizing from your actual bone marrow. Your authenticity becomes your vibration, and your embodiment becomes your spell. So we're not here to bypass the human. We're here to bless it. Earth School's messy, but it's also miraculous. And your willingness to keep returning to the breath and to the body and to the practice of living your truth is what makes you a mystic. Not the crystals or the titles, but the tenacity to show up every daggum day as your soul in a human suit doing the very best it can. Integration is a love story between your soul and your schedule, between your vision and your voice. And the more you live it, the more you light the way for others. And not through preaching, but just through presence and through choosing again. So choose again, speak the truth again, rest again, spiral again, love again. Because this isn't the end, it's only just the becoming. If you loved this episode, be sure to hit that subscribe button and leave us a glowing review. It helps more beautiful souls like you find this space. Because your words matter, your energy ripples, and every review is like a little spell of support for the Synaptic Soul mission. So until next time, stay curious, stay cosmic, and keep waking the F up.